The Obolus and the infinite coin eye the weight of departure. The final 36 hours of Elias Vance's life on Earth were distilled into a sensory deprivation chamber. It was a space designed not for peace, but for processing, a coffin of woven carbon fiber and white noise where he was meant to shed the past like an old skin. He lay on his back, the synthetic cushion molding perfectly to his form, the air temperature calibrated to erase the sensation of touch. He could not see. He could not hear the Pacific wind that still swept across the launch complex just beyond the triple-layered walls. He could only feel the decision, a monumental, unquantifiable mass resting squarely on his chest. He was 42, an astrobiologist and philosopher, and the sole occupant of ProjectAURA's flagship, a deep space scout vessel known formally as the New Horizon, but nicknamed by the engineers with grim historic humor, the Obolus. An obolus, a small coin, was what the ancients placed on the tongue of the dead to pay the ferryman across the river Styx. Elias was not dead, but he was certainly paying the fare. He was leaving everything behind for a one-way trip, a 90-year solo journey to the Gliese 667cc system, a journey from which no return schedule existed, only the hope of arrival. He inhaled deeply. The air scrubbers were humming faintly, a sound he had spent hours learning to ignore, yet now he chased it. It was the last Earth oxygen he would ever breathe, recycled through a filter, but born of forests and oceans he would never touch again. He let the finality of it settle in his lungs. Through the silence, a voice broke the isolation, thin and crackling over a bone conduction speaker embedded in the cushion beneath his occipital lobe. It was Dr. Lena Hansen, the mission director, her voice frayed with the pressure of 1,000 final checks. Elias, time to move. We are 1 hour from suit up. How is the separation protocol feeling? Elias allowed himself a ghost of a smile. Lena always framed existential crises as procedural checks. Complete, Lena, he replied, his voice sounding rusty even in the confines of his own skull. The past has been converted to potential energy. The coin has been accepted. Good. No residuals. No sudden impulse to run out and buy a terrible sandwich. Only the desire to see the stars I won't know by name anymore. But that impulse is part of the mission. Lena paused. The world, the billions you are leaving behind, they're thinking of you, Elias. I know, and I've thanked them all. Now, I need them to release me. This voyage cannot carry the inertia of 7 billion regrets. He pushed the release lever. The chamber hissed, the lid retracted, and the sudden, overwhelming white light of the final preparation room blinded him. He blinked rapidly, his eyes adjusting from the internal blackness to the stark, sterile reality of his purpose. The room was clad in soft, matte gray paneling. Only 2 figures stood waiting. Lena, wearing a sterile lab coat that seemed too flimsy for the weight of the moment, and Technician Kai, stoic and focused, holding the segmented shell of the pressure suit. The Obolus is waiting, Elias, Lena said, her gaze fixed on the timeline display above Kai's. Head, it's time to board. Aye, aye. The violent quiet of ascension, the journey from the preparation room to the command module was short, carried by a clean room transport trolley along a vibration-dampened path. It was a walk measured in meters, but psychologically, it was the final 1,000-mile boundary between humanity and oblivion. Inside the Obolus cockpit, a cramped, elegant shell of black glass and soft luminescence, Elias clipped into the acceleration couch. The suit was heavy and stiff, smelling of new polymers and processed air. The helmet seal clicked, and the world was reduced to the crackle of the comms loop and the sound of his own regulated breathing. Mission control to Obolus, came the voice of Launch Director Graham. All pre-flight diagnostics green. Habitat pressure nominal. Cryovault integrity confirmed. Autonomous flight systems standing by. We are holding at T-5 minutes, 45 seconds. Elias closed his eyes and allowed himself one final, non-technical thought, a memory of the smell of rain on dry pavement. Then he banished it. The memory, like the coin, had been spent. The countdown began, a monotonous sequence of automated voices that were designed to sound clinical and unconcerned. At T-30 seconds, the massive umbilical arms retracted with an audible groan that shook the capsule. T-10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. The deep, rumbling thrum began, a resonance that was felt first in the soles of his boots, traveling up his spine and settling in his chest. It was the sound of millions of liters of propellant becoming incandescent plasma. 6. The thrum became a roar. 5, 4. The G-forces began to push, soft at first, squeezing the breath from his diaphragm. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. The world ceased to be still. It was not merely loud, it was violent. The engines were not a noise, but a physical, shaking force, tearing the ship from the gravity well. Elias felt the 7G pressure crush him back into the couch, his vision tunneling into a kaleidoscope of gray and purple. His training took over. He breathed shallowly, counting his pulse, maintaining his focus on the barely audible voice of Graham reciting velocities. This phase was a necessary evil, a chaotic explosion required to achieve a serene solitude. The atmosphere thinned, the vibrations smoothed, morphing from a rattling chaos into a steady, intense strain. The light outside the window, which had been a blinding white reflection of the flames, began to turn black. Stage 1 separation confirmed. Stage 2 ignition. Nominal burn. A powerful, jarring thud, followed by a brief, weightless shudder. Elias felt a sudden lightness as the first stage fell away, then the immediate return of G-forces as the second stage ignited, pushing him harder, faster. He endured the pressure, his mind drifting not to the past, but to the physics of the escape velocity. The precise amount of energy needed to permanently sever the link. He was riding a directed bomb, sacrificing comfort and stability for the geometric perfection of a parabolic trajectory. Telemetry reads orbital insertion confirmed. Engine cut off. Welcome to the new horizon, Elias. The pressure vanished entirely. The absolute silence that followed the roar was the deepest quiet he had ever experienced. The helmet was still loud with the white noise of the life support, but outside the hull, there was nothing. transition was so abrupt, it felt like he had been struck deaf. He unbuckled the harness, his body drifting gently against the restraints. His breath was steady. He was floating in the dark, surrounded by consoles blinking with green, placid light. He was in space. Aye. The Obolus and the pale blue marble, the next 4 hours, were dedicated to deploying the main ship segments. The Obolus was a compact, 3-stage vessel. The cockpit command module, the habitat ring for short-term use and deceleration, and the massive, cylindrical core containing the cryovaults, the fusion drive, and the hydroponics garden. Elias ran the diagnostics from the main chair. With a series of low-frequency metallic clunks and hums, the habitat ring unfolded like a blooming flower, the solar arrays spreading out their black petals, catching the intense, unfiltered sunlight. The ship stretched out, now nearly 200 meters long, a technological needle aimed at the black velvet void. It was time for the final, critical burn, the translunar injection, TLI. The moment the ship would break free of Earth's gravitational lock and commit to the deep void. Elias rotated the ship slowly, bringing the Earth into the central observation port, which was currently just a reinforced pane of quartz. The view was simply everything. He had seen thousands of simulations, but nothing prepared him for the raw, painterly beauty of the planet. It was a massive, swirling orb of sapphire, white, and ochre, impossibly vivid against the crushing blackness of space. The clouds were not vapor. They were thick, textured wool. The oceans were not water. They were liquid glass, reflecting an infinite star field. He placed his hand against the quartz. It was cool. Mission control. Obolus is nominal and ready for TLI burn. Graham's voice was softer now, tinged with a solemnity that acknowledged this was the true separation. Copy, Elias. You have 3 minutes to burn initiation. We are transitioning to autonomous trajectory control in T-minus 120 seconds. Take your moment. Elias leaned close to the window, watching the continents turn beneath him. Africa drifted past, a vast, complex topography of history and humanity. He tried to lock down a single visual detail, a way to compress the entire experience of being human into one small, portable image. He failed. The scale was too immense. He thought of the phrase, the pale blue dot, Carl Sagan's famous description of Earth seen from 4 billion miles away. But from here, still relatively close, it was less a dot and more a complete world, beautiful and terrifyingly fragile. And he was leaving it, not in anger, but in the most profound act of faith that humanity deserved a second place to breathe, and that he was the ferryman charged with finding it. When the TLI burn began, it was smoother than the launch, a long, sustained push that lasted for 8 minutes. It was the thrust of commitment. When the engines finally cut off, the ship was irrevocably set on a heliocentric trajectory, a celestial billiard ball thrown out into the vast, cosmic plane. Elias pulled back from the window. He was moving away at 11 kilometers per second, and the blue marble was already perceptibly smaller, receding into the infinite darkness. It was no longer a world. It was a memory in the process of fatting. It was the Obolus the price paid. He activated the ship's internal chronometer. The mission clock started 0 years, 0 days, 0 hours, 000001. The real journey had begun. IV. The ship's embrace, the Obolus, was now fully functional, a pressurized bubble of life moving silently through the void. Elias spent the next 2 weeks, the maximum period before hibernation, was required due to resource constraints, acclimatizing to his eternal home. The interior of the habitat ring was designed for psychological endurance. The walls were lined with passive fiber optic panels that mimicked a clear, pale blue sky during the artificial day cycle, and a deep, nebula-like purple during the night. The floor was covered in a soft, non-slip matting that allowed him to use magnetic footwear for stability, while still affording the freedom of a gentle 110G environment created by the habitat ring's slow, deliberate rotation. Elias' routine became monastic. 3 hours of maintenance and diagnostic checks, 3 hours of low-G exercise, essential to trick his body into retaining bone density, 3 hours dedicated to the hydroponics garden, and the remaining time for the primary mission protocols, the archives. The archive was the true cargo of the Obolus, an immense data library containing the entirety of human knowledge, art, and history, along with the genetic material for the colony he was meant to plant. Every evening, Elias would settle into the small, cushioned library nook, where the ship's gentle hum was the loudest sound. He was tasked with curating the archive for the first generation of colonists, deciding what stories, what poems, and what scientific breakthroughs deserved to be immediately accessible. It was an exercise in radical humility, an acknowledgement that 90 years from now, his judgments might be all that mattered. He spent hours sifting through musical scores, ultimately selecting Bach for its mathematical perfection and Miles Davis for its raw human improvisation. He chose the complete works of Shakespeare for the poetry of the human condition, and the full run of the New Yorker for the mundane, beautiful absurdity of the 21st century. He was the last editor of a civilization. The hydroponics garden, situated in the core of the habitat ring, quickly became his sanctuary. It was a 20-square-meter wall of carefully controlled environment where basil, chives, kale, and dwarf apple trees grew under the pink-purple glow of specialized LEDs. The rich, earthy smell of the nutrient solution was the only non-synthetic aroma on the entire ship, and it was a tether to the planet he had left. One evening, staring at a small, green tomato forming on a vine, a miracle of contained bioengineering, Elias realized the true definition of solitude. It wasn't the lack of people, it was the lack of accident. Every single molecule, every flicker of light, and every recycled breath in the Obolus was accounted for, controlled, and intentional. There was no sudden storm, no spontaneous laughter, no unexpected knock at the door. There was only the perfect, terrifying predictability of his solitary existence. He touched the smooth skin of the tomato. It felt cold under the LED light. "The greatest luxury you have, Obolus," he whispered, "is that you can still grow an ugly weed. Don't ever lose that capacity for the unplanned." The surrender 2 weeks past, marked only by the cyclic blue and purple of the habitat lights. The time for the primary hibernation was at hand. The ship was fully calibrated, its engines were silent, and its automated systems were placed in a long-term watch state. The Obolus was now drifting, a metallic ghost coasting on the momentum of its TLI burn, its fusion drive powering down to a minimal reactor tick, generating just enough energy to maintain the life support and the cryovaults. The target was 667 cc, 23.6 light-years away, a journey that would span nearly a century of subjective Earth time. Elias would be conscious for only 5 years of that period in carefully scheduled awakenings, one every decade to check systems, troubleshoot major issues, and most importantly, maintain his psychological resilience. The hibernation protocol was not just a medical procedure, it was a psychological surrender. Elias returned to the command module for his final log entry. He sat down in the command chair, the viewport dark, now only showing the distant pinpoint stars. He initiated the log recording. Mission log, Elias Vance, day 14.17. Entering primary hibernation protocol. He leaned back, resting his gloved hands on the console. The ship is nominal. The habitat is stable. The garden is thriving. I have spent the last 2 weeks saying goodbye, not to individuals, but to the abstract concept of being human on Earth. The gravity, the weather, the chaos, the noise, it's all been filed away. He paused, running a thumb over the polished edge of the command module casing. There is a strange, quiet comfort in this absolute isolation. Earth demands constant attention. Here, the universe only asks for patience, and I have 90 years to give it. I have left a message for my successor, or perhaps simply for myself in 10 years. A simple instruction: do not try to recall the scent of the sea. It will only break your focus. He cleared his throat. The Obolus is now perfectly still, a tomb moving at impossible speeds. I have done my checks. I have prepared the payload. I have curated the memories. He stood up, the movement slow and heavy in the microgravity, walked toward the rear access hatch, the corridor leading to the cryovaults dimly lit by emergency strips. The cryovault was less a bed and more a vertical, pressurized tank, its internal chamber gleaming with frost. Elias stripped off his suit, folding it carefully, treating it like a beloved artifact he would need again. He stood naked for a moment in the cold, antiseptic air, a biological machine preparing for a long, synthetic sleep. He opened the vault door. Inside, the platform was ready. He looked at the injection port on his forearm, a small, silver needle that would deliver the cocktail of neuroinhibitors and metabolic depressants. He stepped onto the platform, gripping the overhead stabilization bar. He looked up, past the curve of the vault's ceiling, imagining the ship speeding through the silent, cold blackness. He was utterly, completely alone. He inserted the needle. The console on the vault's exterior blinked from orange to a solid, calm green, initiating cryocycle. The first sensation was a cold, sharp ache that spread rapidly from his armpit down his torso. It wasn't the temperature. It was the deep internal chemistry beginning to shut down the machinery of his life. His heart rate, visible on the small internal display, dropped from 60 to 45, then 30. His breath became shallow, almost imperceptible. The second sensation was profound heaviness, a psychological drag that pulled his consciousness down into a thick, syrupy darkness. It was the surrender he had trained for, the intentional letting go of the self. He watched the numbers drop: metabolism, core temperature, brainwave activity. He was becoming data, a low-energy signal preserved in a cold tube. As the darkness wrapped around him, a final, unbidden thought emerged, clear and bright before the final, permanent fade. It wasn't a regret or a memory, but a future sensation. The feeling of true, non-recycled gravity on the surface of Gliese, 667 cc. That would be the payment redeemed. His consciousness dimmed, reduced to a tiny, flickering candle flame in an infinite black cave. The vault door began to slide shut, sealing him inside. Just before the final click of the pressure seal, a single, minuscule vibration traveled through the ship's structure, not an error, but the faint, distant hum of the fusion reactor beginning its slow, steady pulse that would carry him, sleeping, toward the silent, promised shore. Mission log end. Entering cryocycle 1. Next scheduled awakening. Year 10.